Okay, test. Okay, we're good. This is the final thing I think I'll explain in this part, in this file called Dependency Injection. And so I explained it in these notes at the very first time we see depends mentioned. So what's dependency injection in FastAPI? I've put some links here that will help you out, but I've also added a TLDR version, so if you just want a summary for it. What I'll read with you now is actually the TLDR of the TLDR, is that when we put depends like this, as a parameter in a function, we can basically think that this function is saying the following. I depend on running this function, the function inside depends. I depend on running this function first to proceed with my logic. So let's take this as an example. Register user, when the front end calls a request for the back end for this endpoint, we run this function. But before we run this function, we see if there are any dependencies. And there is dependency on validate course function. So we first run validate course function, which I'll show to you in a second, and the returned value of this function, we put it in this boolean called course okay. Okay, so this is what depends mean. And let's see what validate course is to get a feel of what's happening. Basically, it just checks that the origins from which the request comes from is within the origins list. Remember the origins list? The one in env example over here. In here, this one. Yeah, so we check that from this function, which I showed you previously. And the list of origins that we have, we check the incoming origin from the request parameter and see if the header of origin or host init, whichever header init, if the values of this header is in the list of allowed origins, okay, then we're good to go, okay, then we're good to go. Otherwise, we raise an exception, okay, of incoming origin host, and we say what's the request is incoming is not in the origin list, the allowed origin list. One might ask, why do we do as function specifically for this, even though we have this code right here that I showed you previously, the add middleware where we add list of allowed origins? You're right, we have that, but I think, because I'm not the one who initially added this, I think the main reason for this is for any extra checks that we can do to maybe bypass this header thing. So for example, the logic we're doing here is that we're checking for another thing, like not just the good old default origin or host headers. No, we're just checking for a custom header that we put, and to see if it has certain values based on a certain environment, then we'll also allow it to return true. So if we're adding additional logic that we want to check and based on it allow the function to run, we can call this function validate course, okay? And we can use dependency injection like I showed you before. So that's the reason we use this, and you see this everywhere basically. Like see, almost all the functions that we have add feedback, all of the endpoints, we use this logic, okay? So that's something. And also, you might have noticed that this has the request object passed to it. So this is passed implicitly, okay? So in a function which is the depends function from an endpoint function, you have the normal register request, okay? So this is the object that comes from the front end, which contains data with the same structure as this, key value pairs. And implicitly, we also get a request object. Here we don't need it, we just need this, so we just called this value and that's it. But in here we need it. So in here we explicitly put it as a parameter so that when it's sent to us from the front end, and when we run this, we technically also receive the normal request info from the front end as well, okay? So that's something to keep in mind. That's why this part works here. I think, I'm not sure about this. Technically, if we put in this get settings, if we put also requests here, like rec colon requests, I think it will work as well, like we did here, but I'm not sure about this, to be honest. So yeah, but this is at least is the logic for this part. This is here, and this is the logic of the depends. You can see more info about it here. And yeah, we use that logic everywhere. So for example, in here, if it's not okay, we're not going to register the user. So if the request comes from any other host that's not related to us, then we'll decline that request and we'll raise a course not permitted error. Okay, yeah, I don't think I need to explain much else in the file. The only thing remaining to explain is just the endpoints themselves, just to explain what each endpoint does. And this, you really can understand it just by reading any comments here, or just the overall doc string is sufficient. For example, here, get all threads, retrieve all threads from the. Again, I know I didn't explain what a thread means, but this part will come when I explain Ansari, the agent of Ansari, the AI model. But yeah, but overall, the code here is pretty self-explainable, and yeah. I think what I suggest is, if you're really confused in something, try to search it here first, and then search it in the UI, in the front-end repo, and see what it's called. Maybe that will help you have a sense of okay, where does this lie in the grand scheme of things. Okay, so that's all regarding the main API file. I don't think there is anything else I can add here. So yeah, next up will probably be the WhatsApp files before the logic of Ansari itself. Yeah, and then we'll go to the AI model, and then some miscellaneous files, and we'll be done. Yay.